Have you ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what's really watching you back? Because 3 days ago, we got an answer that has left the world's most brilliant scientists questioning everything they thought they knew about the universe and their own sanity. What I'm about to reveal will shatter your understanding of what's unfolding in the cosmic darkness above us at this very moment. And I need to be honest with you. Once you learn what I've discovered, once you see the evidence that's being quietly passed between observatories and research facilities in the dead of night, you'll never look at the stars the same way again. That sense of peaceful wonder you feel gazing upward, it's about to be replaced by something far more complex, far more unsettling, and infinitely more real. 72 hours ago, something happened in deep space that shouldn't be possible. An event so violent it released the energy of multiple nuclear arsenals, yet so strange in its outcome that physicists are now questioning whether the fundamental laws that govern our reality are as complete as we believed. Research teams across 3 continents watched their instruments register data that violates every principle we've spent centuries establishing. And the terrifying part? Every independent observation confirms the same impossible conclusion. An object traveling at 85,000 kilometers per hour, fast enough to circumnavigate our entire planet in under half an hour, struck something in the darkness between stars. The collision should have been catastrophic, final, absolute. The kinetic energy involved was equivalent to detonating dozens of thermonuclear weapons in a single instant. Every calculation, every model, every simulation predicted the same outcome. Total destruction, debris scattered across millions of kilometers, energy dissipating according to the immutable laws of thermodynamics. But that's not what happened, not even remotely close. The impact occurred, the energy was released, and then reality seemed to pause. The rules broke down. What should have been annihilation became something else entirely. Something that has researchers using words like impossible, inexplicable, and in whispered conversations behind closed doors, words far more frightening than that. Here's what's keeping the world's top physicists awake at night, what's triggering emergency consultations at research facilities you've never heard of, what's causing encrypted communications to fly between space agencies at all hours. The energy from that impact didn't behave the way energy must behave. It didn't dissipate into heat and radiation. The debris field that should exist simply isn't there. Instead, something occurred that appears to violate conservation laws so fundamental that questioning them feels like questioning whether gravity exists or whether water flows downhill. And the evidence isn't coming from one dubious source or a single compromised instrument. Multiple observation networks operating independently across different continents, all recorded the same physically impossible sequence of events. This is hard data from professional installations, corroborated by amateur astronomers who happen to be watching the right patch of sky at the right moment. There's no instrument malfunction that could explain this. No human error that could account for what we're seeing. I need you to understand the gravity of what I'm telling you. I've spent 72 consecutive hours doing nothing but analyzing this situation, reading leaked communications between panicked researchers, examining classified observation data that was never meant to reach public eyes, speaking with scientists who are genuinely terrified to go on record about what they've witnessed. These aren't fringe theorists or conspiracy enthusiasts. These are decorated professionals with tenure at prestigious institutions, people who've spent their entire careers building reputations on careful, conservative analysis. And they're scared. The object that struck our target, we'll call it 3I Atlas for now, carries its own set of mysteries that make the collision even more inexplicable. Spectroscopic analysis of its composition reveals metallic signatures that don't match anything in our solar system's natural catalog. The ratios are wrong. The elemental abundances don't fit any known formation process. It's as if this object was forged under conditions that simply don't exist in nature as we understand it. Its trajectory before impact tells an even stranger story. Working backward from the collision point, astronomers have calculated a journey measured not in years or decades, but in millions of years. This thing has been traveling through the void since before human civilization existed, possibly since before our species evolved. It originated from a region of space so distant that the stars visible from its starting point would create a completely alien constellation pattern, a night sky we wouldn't even recognize. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. That trajectory wasn't random. The path this object followed through interstellar space, the course that brought it to precisely the right location at precisely the right moment to collide with 3I Atlas. The statistical probability of that happening by pure chance is so infinitesimally small that calling it coincidence requires more faith than acknowledging the alternative. Dr. Sarah Chen, and I'm being deliberately vague about her exact credentials and institution because she's already facing pressure for speaking too openly about this, was on duty at a deep space monitoring station when the impact occurred. Her instruments were perfectly positioned to capture the event in extraordinary detail across multiple wavelengths. What she recorded in those critical seconds has kept her awake every night since, questioning not just her instruments, but her understanding of physical reality itself. In a communication that later leaked through academic channels, she wrote something that should send chills down your spine. The energy patterns don't just violate thermodynamics, they mock it. I've watched the data 100 times now, run every diagnostic protocol we have. The equipment is functioning perfectly, which means what I'm seeing is real. The energy didn't scatter or dissipate. It was absorbed, redirected, and re-emitted in structured patterns. Patterns, not chaos, not randomness, deliberate, coordinated patterns that suggest design, purpose, control. She went on to describe how the post-impact emissions showed coherence across multiple frequencies, as if the energy was being channeled through systems rather than exploding outward in the chaotic bloom you'd expect from a violent collision. It's like watching electrical current move through a circuit board, she wrote to a colleague at 3 a.m., her message time-stamped and desperate. The energy is being routed, managed, distributed according to what looks like predetermined pathways. This isn't what happens when two objects smash together at cosmic velocities. This is something else entirely. What she witnessed triggered an immediate cascade of reactions among researchers who saw her data. Emergency video conferences were convened in the middle of the night. Encrypted files were shared between institutions that normally compete rather than collaborate. And slowly, reluctantly, a consensus began to form among those with access to the observations. a consensus that nobody wanted to voice publicly, because doing so would invite ridicule, threaten careers, and force confrontation with implications that most weren't prepared to accept. We're not looking at a natural phenomenon. We're looking at something designed, something that responded to impact not by breaking apart, but by activating. And if that's true, if the data that multiple independent sources are confirming is accurate, then everything changes. Before we go any deeper into this rabbit hole, before I show you the evidence that's been accumulating over these past 72 hours, I want to hear from you. Right now, wherever you are in the world, I want you to leave a comment telling me, what country are you in? What city? What time is it as you listen to these words? Are you lying in bed, letting sleep slowly overtake you while this mystery unfolds? Or are you listening during a stolen moment of your day, headphones in, the familiar world around you suddenly feeling a little less certain? I'm asking because what's happening above us right now, what began 3 days ago with that impossible collision, affects every single person on this planet. This isn't some distant academic concern or abstract scientific puzzle. This is immediate, it's real, and it's unfolding while most of the world remains completely unaware. And if you find yourself drawn to mysteries that exist at the razor's edge of human knowledge, if you want to follow this story as it develops in real time, because believe me, it's far from over, then hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel. What I'm about to reveal in the coming minutes will challenge every assumption you hold about what's possible in our universe, about whether we're alone, and about what might be watching from the darkness between stars. Because 3i Atlas isn't just an object anymore. After that impact, after what happened in those impossible moments that followed, it's become something else. Something that's approaching Earth with purpose and precision. And we have less time than you think to understand what that purpose might be. To truly grasp the significance of what happened 3 days ago, we need to first understand the object itself, 3i Atlas, and the extraordinary journey it's been on long before it entered our cosmic neighborhood. Because this wasn't just any space rock drifting through the void. This was something that had already been raising uncomfortable questions among astronomers for weeks before the impact occurred. Understanding 3i Atlas requires us to first appreciate just how profoundly rare interstellar visitors truly are. For the vast majority of human history, spanning thousands of years of astronomical observation, we operated under the assumption that everything we could see moving across the night sky originated within our solar system, every planet, every asteroid, every comet, all children of the same stellar nursery that birthed our sun approximately 4.6 billion years ago. This assumption made intuitive sense. Our solar system is, after all, an island of matter in the vast ocean of space. The distances between stars are so tremendously large that objects traveling between them must journey for millions or even billions of years. The odds of detecting such a traveler during its brief passage through our stellar neighborhood seemed vanishingly small. Then everything changed. In recent years, our observation capabilities improved to the point where we could detect these cosmic wanderers. The first confirmed interstellar visitor sent waves of excitement through the astronomical community. Here was physical matter, forged in the fires of an alien star system, carrying with it the chemical signatures of formation conditions that might differ from our own. A messenger from beyond, offering tantalizing hints about the diversity of planetary systems scattered throughout the galaxy. These interstellar travelers are extraordinarily difficult to spot, and this difficulty isn't just a matter of technology, it's fundamental to the nature of their visits. They move through our solar system at tremendous velocities, spending only weeks or months close enough for detailed observation. By the time our automated surveys detect them and alert astronomers to their presence, they're often already departing, racing back toward the infinite darkness from which they emerged. This makes every single observation precious beyond measure. Every spectrum captured, every measurement of position and velocity, every image taken across different wavelengths, all of it represents data we may never be able to gather again. Once these objects exit our solar system, they're lost to us forever, continuing journeys that may last longer than our entire civilization. 3I Atlas was detected by an automated survey system designed to catalog moving objects against the fixed background of distant stars. The initial discovery was routine, just another point of light drifting across the celestial sphere, flagged by algorithms for human review. When astronomers examined the preliminary data, the object's velocity and trajectory immediately marked it as special. The numbers indicated an origin from beyond our solar system. Another interstellar visitor had arrived. Research teams worldwide immediately began scrambling for observation time on major telescopes. These opportunities are rare enough that they generate intense competition among scientists. Everyone wanted their chance to study this cosmic traveler, to add their data to humanity's growing understanding of what lies beyond our stellar neighborhood. The initial velocity measurements came in at approximately 190,000 kilometers per hour relative to our Sun. Fast, certainly, but not unusually so for an object on an interstellar trajectory. Its path indicated what astronomers call a hyperbolic orbit, a one-way trip through our solar system. It would swing past the Sun, perhaps pass near some planets, and then exit back into the depths of space, never to return. A brief visit from an eternal wanderer. Researchers began the careful work of characterization. What was this object made of? How large was it? Did it show any signs of activity, the outgassing of frozen materials that could affect its trajectory? Was it rotating, and if so, how fast, and in what orientation? These questions drive the early stages of studying any new astronomical object. But as September progressed and observation data accumulated, something peculiar began to emerge from the noise. Something that didn't quite fit the expected profile of an inert chunk of rock and ice simply falling through space under the influence of gravity. Dr. Marcus Way, a specialist in celestial mechanics with over 2 decades of experience, was among the first to notice the discrepancies. In his research notes from early September, later shared within the scientific community, he documented a growing sense of puzzlement. The trajectory wasn't evolving quite the way his models predicted. There were small deviations, subtle changes in velocity that his simulations couldn't account for through gravitational interactions alone. At first, the natural explanation seemed obvious. Outgassing. When comets approach the Sun, frozen materials on their surface heat up and sublimate directly from ice to gas. These jets of gas can act like tiny rocket engines, producing forces that alter the object's trajectory in unpredictable ways. Perhaps 3I Atlas was experiencing similar outgassing events. But the pattern of trajectory changes didn't match what outgassing should produce. Random jets firing from a tumbling, irregular object should create chaotic effects, nudges in unpredictable directions at unpredictable times. Yet the course adjustments observed in 3I Atlas appeared structured, consistent, almost deliberate. The deviations weren't random at all, they seemed to be corrections. It's behaving less like a comet and more like something maintaining a specific trajectory, Dr. Wei noted in a message to colleagues. The observation hung in the air uncomfortably, because maintaining a trajectory implies intent, control, guidance, concepts that have no place in discussions of natural celestial objects. It's crucial to pause here and understand just how reluctant scientists are to suggest anything might be behaving in a non-natural way. The entire history of astronomy is filled with examples of phenomena that initially appeared mysterious but eventually yielded to conventional explanation. Strange radio signals that seemed artificial turned out to be rapidly spinning neutron stars. Peculiar dimming patterns in distant stars that sparked speculation about alien megastructures were ultimately explained by dust clouds and planetary debris. Scientists are methodically trained to exhaust every possible natural explanation before even entertaining alternatives. This conservative approach serves humanity well, preventing us from leaping to extraordinary conclusions based on incomplete or misunderstood data. But it also means that when researchers do begin seriously questioning whether something might be genuinely anomalous, they've typically already explored and eliminated dozens of conventional possibilities. And with 3I Atlas, those conventional possibilities were being systematically ruled out, one by one, as the data continued to accumulate through late summer and into early autumn. The accumulating observations of 3I Atlas were creating a portrait that grew more puzzling with each passing day. Its trajectory was threading through our solar system in a way that seemed to defy the random chaos one would expect from a cosmic wanderer. The object was passing remarkably close to several major bodies, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, with a precision that made statisticians uncomfortable. Dr. Jennifer Morrison, a computational astrophysicist specializing in orbital dynamics, began running probability calculations in mid-September. She wanted to determine the likelihood that a randomly tumbling interstellar object would, by pure chance, pass near multiple planets during its brief transit through our stellar neighborhood. The results of her analysis, shared quietly among colleagues before any formal publication, were striking. The probability came back at less than 1 in 2,000. Not impossible. The universe is vast and operates on timescales so long that even wildly improbable events must occasionally occur, but unlikely enough to warrant serious attention. It was the kind of number that makes scientists pause and reconsider their assumptions. Imagine throwing a stone blindfolded and hitting 3 specific windows in 3 different buildings, Dr. Morrison explained in a recorded lecture to graduate students, a lecture that would later circulate more widely than she intended. Yes, it could happen by chance. But if you witnessed it, your first instinct wouldn't be to assume randomness. You'd suspect the thrower could see. The analogy was imperfect, as all analogies are, but it captured the essence of what was troubling researchers. The trajectory seemed too precise, too purposeful for comfort, and there were other peculiarities emerging from the data that compounded this unease. The object's rotation pattern, or rather the lack of expected tumbling, was another source of puzzlement. Most asteroids and comets spin chaotically as they travel through space, their rotation rates and axes determined by formation history and countless subsequent collisions over millions or billions of years. They wobble, they precess, they tumble in complex patterns that can take decades to fully characterize. But 3I Atlas maintained a remarkably stable orientation. Its rotation was regular, controlled, almost artificially steady. Several researchers independently noted this characteristic, and their observations aligned with disturbing consistency. The object wasn't behaving like a chunk of primordial debris that had been knocked around by cosmic forces for eons. It was behaving like something maintaining attitude control. Every time I look at the rotation data, I expect to see the chaos we observe in every other small body, confided Dr. Robert Takahashi, a planetary scientist with extensive experience analyzing asteroid light curves. But it's not there. The stability it's not natural. I don't know how else to say it. These observations were being discussed in increasingly concerned tones during virtual meetings and email exchanges throughout September. The scientific community was beginning to sense that 3I Atlas represented something unprecedented, though most were still reluctant to articulate exactly what that might mean. Then there was the matter of its composition, which spectroscopic analysis revealed to be deeply unusual. When light from the sun reflects off an object and travels back to our telescopes, it carries with it a fingerprint, specific wavelengths absorbed or reflected by the materials on the object's surface. By analyzing this spectrum of light, astronomers can determine what an object is made of without ever physically touching it. The spectroscopic data from 3I Atlas showed signatures of metallic compounds in concentrations that didn't match any known natural formation process in our solar system. There were abundances of certain elements that seemed out of proportion, ratios that suggested formation conditions radically different from anything we'd encountered. Some researchers propose that perhaps the object originated from a stellar system with a very different chemical composition than our own. Stars form from clouds of gas and dust with varying elemental abundances depending on their location in the galaxy and their formation history. A planet or asteroid forming around such a star might indeed show unusual chemical signatures. But even accounting for this possibility, something about the composition seemed off. The distribution of elements wasn't just unusual. It appeared refined, processed, as if the material had undergone some form of metallurgical treatment. Natural processes can create remarkable structures and compounds, to be sure, but there are limits to what random cosmic chemistry can achieve. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a specialist in astrogeology and planetary formation, spent weeks analyzing the spectroscopic data, comparing it against databases of known meteorite compositions, asteroids, comets, and every other solar system body for which detailed chemical information existed. Her conclusion, shared hesitantly with trusted colleagues, was unsettling. I can't find a natural formation pathway that produces this specific combination of elements in these proportions, she wrote in an email dated September 18th, just days before the impact that would change everything. Either we're looking at chemistry from a stellar environment, so radically different from ours that our models don't apply, or Well, I don't want to speculate on the or because I'm not ready to stake my reputation on it. The unspoken alternative hung in the air, a possibility that none of the researchers wanted to articulate directly, because doing so would invite ridicule, damage careers, and potentially derail their ability to continue studying this fascinating object. The scientific method demands extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims, and they didn't yet have that evidence. They had anomalies, puzzles, unexplained data points, but not proof. What they needed was more time, more observations, more data to either find a conventional explanation or to build a case so overwhelming that even the most skeptical reviewer would have to acknowledge something genuinely unprecedented was occurring. They wouldn't get that time. As September moved toward its conclusion, several space agencies began noting something else that added another layer of mystery to an already complicated picture. 3I Atlas was exhibiting faint emissions in the infrared spectrum, thermal radiation that suggested it was warmer than it should be given its distance from the Sun and its presumed composition. Objects in space are heated by solar radiation, and their temperature depends on their distance from the Sun, their color, which determines how much light they absorb versus reflect, and their rotation rate, which affects how evenly heat distributes across their surface. For 3I, Atlas's distance and apparent properties, researchers could calculate an expected temperature range. The object was warmer than that range. Not dramatically so. The excess heat was subtle, requiring sensitive instruments to detect. But it was there, persistent and unexplained. It's as if there's an internal heat source, noted Dr. Amanda Foster, a thermodynamics specialist reviewing the infrared observations. But that doesn't make sense for an object this size. It's not large enough to retain primordial heat from formation, and it's not showing evidence of radioactive decay that might generate warmth. So where is this heat coming from? Natural processes could potentially explain modest thermal anomalies. Perhaps the object had an unusual composition that affected its thermal properties in unexpected ways. Perhaps its rotation pattern created hot spots that skewed the temperature readings. Perhaps there were subsurface materials outgassing slowly, releasing heat as they transitioned from solid to gas. The list of possible explanations was long, but each one required assumptions that strained plausibility. By late September, a quiet sense of urgency had begun permeating the astronomical community studying 3I Atlas. Something wasn't right with this object, and multiple independent lines of evidence were pointing toward the same uncomfortable conclusion. It wasn't behaving like any natural object should. Research teams began preparing papers documenting the various anomalies, though most were careful to frame their findings as puzzles requiring further study rather than evidence of anything too extraordinary. The peer review process would take months, but at least they could establish their observations in the scientific record, claim priority on the discoveries, and contribute to the growing body of knowledge about this mysterious visitor. Then, on September 27th, everything changed. The event that would transform scientific puzzlement into genuine alarm occurred at precisely 1423 Universal Coordinated Time. Dozens of telescopes around the world, both professional and amateur, were monitoring 3I Atlas when it happened. The data they captured would be analyzed and reanalyzed in the days that followed, but the basic facts were undeniable and shocking. An object Later calculations would determine it to be roughly 12 meters in diameter, struck 3I Atlas at a relative velocity of approximately 85,000 kilometers per hour. The impact wasn't a glancing blow, but a nearly direct collision, the kind of cosmic catastrophe that should have resulted in spectacular destruction. Amateur astronomer David Chen was monitoring 3I Atlas from his backyard observatory in California when the impact occurred. His telescope, equipped with a sensitive camera, captured the moment of collision. In an interview he gave to a science news outlet the following day, he described what he saw. There was a sudden brightening, exactly what you'd expect from a high-energy impact, he explained, still sounding somewhat dazed by what he'd witnessed. I thought that was it. I thought I'd just watched 3I Atlas get destroyed. But then, the brightness didn't fade the way it should have. It changed, it pulsed. And the spectrum. He paused, seeming to struggle with how to articulate what came next. The spectrum shifted in ways I've never seen before. It was like watching something impossible unfold in real time. Professional observatories equipped with more sophisticated instruments captured far more detailed data, and that data would prove to be even more troubling than the visual observations suggested. The energy released by the impact should have shattered 3I Atlas, or at minimum ejected massive amounts of debris into space. The kinetic energy involved was equivalent to dozens of nuclear weapons detonating simultaneously. But the expected debris cloud didn't materialize. The fragments that should have been scattered across thousands of kilometers of space simply weren't there. Instead, something happened that violated every principle of physics that should govern such collisions. The energy from the impact appeared to be absorbed, contained, and then redistributed in ways that made no sense according to conventional thermodynamics. Multiple observation networks confirmed the same impossible sequence of events, eliminating the possibility of instrument error or misinterpretation. Dr. Sarah Chen, whom we mentioned earlier, was monitoring deep space observation networks from her facility when the collision occurred. She had been tracking 3I Atlas as part of a broader survey of interstellar objects, and her instruments were perfectly positioned to capture the impact in extraordinary detail across multiple wavelengths of light. In the hours immediately following the collision, she sent a series of increasingly frantic messages to colleagues around the world. One of those messages, later obtained through academic channels, painted a picture of a scientist confronting data that challenged her fundamental understanding of reality. "I've checked and rechecked the instruments 3 times," she wrote at 1647 UTC, just over 2 hours after the impact. "I've run every diagnostic protocol we have. The equipment is functioning perfectly, which means what I'm seeing is real. And I don't know how to process this. The energy didn't dissipate. It was absorbed, converted, and then re-emitted in structured patterns. Patterns. Plural. Not random thermal radiation. Not debris trajectories following momentum conservation. Patterns." She went on to describe how the post-impact emissions showed coherence across multiple wavelengths, as if the energy was being deliberately channeled rather than chaotically scattered. The spectrum of light emanating from 3I Atlas after the collision showed spikes at specific frequencies, regular intervals that suggested structure rather than randomness. "It's like watching a power surge through a circuit board," she attempted to explain in another message sent later that evening. The energy is being routed, managed, distributed according to some kind of design. I don't know how else to describe what I'm seeing. This isn't what happens when you smash two rocks together at 85,000 kilometers per hour. Other researchers around the world were reaching similar conclusions, though most were reluctant to articulate them as directly as Dr. Chen had. The implications were simply too enormous, too career-threatening, too likely to invite mockery from the broader scientific community. Dr. Robert Martinez, a high-energy astrophysicist with decades of experience studying cosmic collisions, was analyzing data from a radio telescope array when he noticed something that made him immediately contact his most trusted colleagues. The radio emissions from 3I Atlas in the minutes following impact showed modulation patterns, regular variations in intensity and frequency that couldn't be explained by any natural process he could identify. Natural radio sources can show periodicities, he explained in a hastily arranged video conference with 5 other researchers the morning after the impact. Pulsars, for instance, are extremely regular, but this is different. This is complexity, multiple overlapping frequencies, phase relationships that suggest coordination. I don't know what else to call it. The video conference, which lasted nearly 4 hours, was marked by long silences as the participants grappled with what they were collectively observing. These were serious scientists with reputations built over entire careers, and they were confronting data that seemed to point toward only one conclusion, a conclusion none of them wanted to be the first to state explicitly. Finally, it was Dr. Jennifer Morrison, the computational astrophysicist, who had earlier calculated the improbable trajectory alignments, who broke the uncomfortable silence hanging over the video call. We need to consider the possibility that 3I Atlas is not a natural object, she said quietly but firmly. I know what that sounds like. I know the implications. But we've been dancing around this for weeks, and after what we've just witnessed, I think we have an obligation to at least discuss it seriously among ourselves before deciding how to proceed. The conversation that followed would remain private among the participants for several more days, but it marked a turning point. For the first time, respected researchers were openly discussing the possibility that 3I Atlas might be something artificial, something created by intelligence, something that challenged the fundamental assumption that we are alone in the universe, or at least alone in our immediate cosmic neighborhood. But even as they debated among themselves, events were unfolding that would soon make their private discussions moot, because 3I Atlas itself was about to provide evidence so compelling, so undeniable, that the question of its nature would be forced into the open whether the scientific community was ready or not. In the 36 hours following the impact, observation networks around the world detected changes in 3I Atlas that accelerated the timeline for revelation. The object's thermal signature was increasing, not gradually, but in distinct steps, as if power systems were being brought online sequentially. Its rotation, already anomalously stable, became even more precisely controlled, orienting itself in ways that suggested deliberate positioning. Most significantly, the radio emissions that Dr. Martinez had noticed became stronger and more structured. By the evening of September 28th, multiple radio telescope arrays were detecting signals from 3I Atlas that showed characteristics increasingly difficult to attribute to natural sources. The signals exhibited bandwidth, modulation patterns, and timing that bore uncomfortable similarities to engineered communication systems. Dr. Amanda Foster, the thermal dynamics specialist, spent that entire night analyzing updated infrared data, watching as 3I Atlas's heat signature evolved in real time. Around 3 a.m. local time, she sent a message to several colleagues that captured the surreal nature of what they were witnessing. "It's warming up systematically, section by section," she wrote. "I can track the progression across its surface. This isn't random outgassing or solar heating. This is sequential activation. I feel like I'm watching something wake up, and that thought terrifies me in ways I can't fully articulate." The terror she mentioned wasn't fear of immediate danger. 3I Atlas was still millions of kilometers from Earth, far beyond any range where it could pose a direct threat. The terror was existential, the vertigo of watching foundational assumptions crumble in real time. If 3I Atlas was indeed artificial, if it was indeed responding to the impact by activating systems, then everything humanity thought it understood about its place in the cosmos was about to change irrevocably. By September 29th, the growing collection of anomalous data could no longer be contained within private communications among researchers. Too many people had observed the impact and its aftermath. Amateur astronomers, university observatories, space agencies across multiple nations, the number of witnesses was too large, the evidence too widely distributed to suppress even if anyone had wanted to try. The first public hint of something unusual came from an unexpected source. A popular astronomy podcast run by a former NASA engineer turned science communicator released an emergency episode titled "Something Strange is Happening" with 3I Atlas. The episode featured interviews with several amateur astronomers who had captured the impact and its aftermath, and while it stopped short of making extraordinary claims, it compiled enough publicly available observations to raise serious questions. Within hours, the episode had been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times. Social media lit up with speculation and debate. News outlets began reaching out to official sources for comment, and the careful walls that had kept the discussion contained within the scientific community began to crumble. Space agencies found themselves in an impossible position. They couldn't deny that something unusual was occurring. Too many independent observers had captured data that was already circulating publicly. But they also couldn't confirm the most sensational interpretations without triggering panic or, worse, being dismissed as having lost credibility. The official statements that emerged over the next 24 hours were masterpieces of careful language. Unusual but not unprecedented phenomena, requiring further analysis before definitive conclusions. Multiple working hypotheses under consideration. The words were designed to acknowledge the observations without endorsing any particular interpretation, buying time for more data, more analysis, more certainty, before making claims that couldn't be walked back. But while official channels exercised caution, the underground networks of researchers were becoming increasingly convinced that caution was a luxury they no longer had. Private mailing lists lit up with detailed analyses. Encrypted messaging groups shared data that wasn't yet ready for formal publication, but was too important to sit on. A consensus was forming not through official channels, but through the organic process of scientific collaboration that 3I Atlas represented something genuinely unprecedented. Dr. Marcus Way, the celestial mechanics specialist who had first noticed the trajectory anomalies weeks earlier, began compiling a comprehensive timeline of observations. His document, which would eventually run to over 200 pages of detailed analysis, traced the evolution of Three Eyes Atlas from initial detection through the impact and its aftermath. The picture that emerged from this comprehensive review was stark and troubling. Every single observation we've made contradicts natural explanations, he wrote in the document's executive summary. Individually, many of these anomalies might be explainable through exotic but natural processes. But collectively, the probability that all of these phenomena arise from natural causes is vanishingly small. We are left with a conclusion that would have seemed absurd just months ago. Three-Eye Atlas is artificial. The document circulated privately among dozens of researchers on September 29th, and by the morning of September 30th, today, as you listen to these words, it had leaked to several science journalists who were preparing detailed stories that would bring the full scope of the mystery to public attention. But even as journalists typed their articles and researchers debated how to present their findings to a world unprepared for such revelations, Three-Eye Atlas itself was about to render those careful preparations irrelevant. Because at 09:17 UTC on September 30th, something happened that would remove all doubt, all ambiguity, all possibility of natural explanation. The object sent a signal directly toward Earth. The signal was detected simultaneously by radio telescope arrays on 3 continents. Its characteristics were unmistakable, undeniable, and absolutely impossible to attribute to any natural phenomenon. This wasn't the ambiguous modulation patterns that researchers had been cautiously analyzing over the previous days. This was a deliberate, structured transmission beamed directly at our planet with precision that required knowledge of Earth's exact position. Dr. Helena Kowalski, director of the European Radio Astronomy Network, was in a routine coordination meeting when the alert came through. Her assistant burst into the conference room, tablet in hand, face drained of color. "Director, you need to see this immediately," were the only words spoken before everyone in the room crowded around the screen. What they saw would be replicated on screens in observatories around the world within minutes. A signal emanating from Three-Eye Atlas, narrowband and powerful, modulated in ways that screamed intelligence. The frequency wasn't random. It was a mathematical constant, a prime number ratio that appears nowhere in nature but would be immediately recognizable to any civilization with knowledge of mathematics. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the tablet, Dr. Kowalski would later recall in an interview. We'd spent weeks debating whether this object might be artificial, carefully weighing evidence, trying to remain skeptical. And then suddenly, there it was, undeniable proof that we weren't alone, that we had never been alone, that something out there was aware of us and was actively trying to communicate. The signal lasted for 17 minutes, during which every radio telescope on Earth that could orient toward Three-Eye Atlas was frantically realigned to capture as much data as possible. The transmission showed structure at multiple levels, carrier frequencies, modulation patterns, what appeared to be distinct packets of information separated by precise timing intervals. Dr. Robert Martinez, the astrophysicist who had first noticed the radio anomalies after the impact, was among the first to begin detailed analysis of the signal structure. Working with colleagues across multiple time zones, he started identifying patterns within the transmission that suggested not just intelligence, but sophisticated communication protocols. "It's like they're teaching us their language in real time," he explained during a hastily convened video conference with researchers worldwide. "The signal starts simple: basic mathematical sequences, prime numbers, fundamental physical constants, things that any technological civilization would understand regardless of their specific development path. Then it builds, becomes more complex, introducing new symbols and patterns that seem to build on what came before. The implications were staggering and immediate. Whoever or whatever had created 3i Atlas wasn't just aware of Earth. They were attempting to establish communication. The signal was carefully constructed to be both unmistakable in its artificial origin and potentially decipherable to recipients with sufficient mathematical and technical knowledge. But even as researchers around the world began the painstaking work of analyzing the transmission, trying to extract meaning from the patterns it contained, a more urgent question was emerging. Why now? Why had 3i Atlas chosen this specific moment, mere days after being struck by another object, to announce its presence so dramatically? The answer to that question would come from an unexpected direction, and it would raise even more troubling possibilities than the signal itself. Dr. Jennifer Morrison, working with updated trajectory data, made a discovery that sent chills through everyone who heard it. The object that had struck 3i Atlas 3 days earlier, the impactor that had triggered this entire sequence of events, hadn't been a random collision after all. Detailed analysis of its trajectory before impact showed that it too had been on an interstellar path, and its course had brought it to precisely the right point in space at precisely the right time to collide with 3i Atlas. The probability of two interstellar objects randomly colliding in our solar system is so low that it shouldn't happen within the lifetime of our Sun, Dr. Morrison explained in a written analysis that would be widely circulated within hours, which means this wasn't random. Either the impactor was guided to hit 3i Atlas, or 3i Atlas positioned itself to be hit, or both objects were following pre-planned trajectories that intersected by design. This revelation added an entirely new dimension to an already mind-bending situation. The impact hadn't been an accident that triggered dormant systems in 3i Atlas. It had been an intentional event, possibly a planned activation sequence. The collision was meant to happen, was perhaps required to happen, to initiate whatever process was now unfolding. But why such a violent activation method? Why design a system that required being struck with the kinetic energy of nuclear weapons to begin operation? The questions multiplied faster than answers could be formulated. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the astrogeologist who had struggled to explain 3i Atlas's unusual composition weeks earlier, proposed a theory that gained traction among researchers trying to make sense of the bigger picture. Perhaps 3i Atlas had been dormant for an extremely long time, not just years or decades, but potentially millions of years. A hibernation so deep that only a massive energy input could restart its systems. Think of it as a cosmic wake-up call, she suggested during a discussion with colleagues. If you're going to send something on a journey that might last millions of years, you need to protect it from degradation, from cosmic radiation, from the slow decay of time. You shut it down completely, shield it, make it look like a natural object so it won't attract unwanted attention. And then you either program it to wake at a specific time, or you send a trigger, another object designed to deliver the exact energy needed to restart systems that have been cold and dark for longer than human civilization has existed. The elegance of this explanation was compelling, but it raised yet another unsettling question. If 3I Atlas had been traveling for millions of years, and if its awakening was planned or programmed, what was the purpose of its journey? What mission required such vast expenditure of time and resources? As researchers grappled with these questions, the signal from 3I Atlas continued. After the initial 17-minute transmission, there had been a pause of several hours, perhaps giving recipients time to process what they'd received, perhaps waiting for some response that never came. Then, at 15:43 UTC, a second transmission began. This one was different. While the first signal had focused on mathematical and physical fundamentals, building a potential language through universal concepts, the second transmission appeared to contain more specific information. The modulation patterns were more complex, the data density higher, the structure more sophisticated. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been working with minimal sleep since the impact 3 days earlier, was part of a team attempting to decode the second transmission in real time. They had set up a collaborative workspace, linking researchers across multiple institutions, pooling their expertise in cryptography, information theory, mathematics, and linguistics to tackle what might be humanity's first genuine alien message. "We're making progress, but it's slow," she reported in an audio message to the broader research community around midnight UTC. "The signal definitely contains structured information. We can identify what look like headers, data packets, error correction codes. It's sophisticated communication engineering. But understanding what the data represents, that's the challenge. We're essentially trying to learn an alien language with no Rosetta Stone, no shared context beyond basic mathematics. Yet even without fully decoding the message, certain patterns were becoming clear. The transmission appeared to include repetitive elements, sequences that showed up multiple times with slight variations, suggesting perhaps coordinates or measurements or instructions. There were sections that correlated with visual patterns when plotted as two-dimensional arrays, hinting that some of the data might be images or diagrams. One particular sequence caught the attention of multiple research teams independently. When analyzed as a series of numbers and converted using various mathematical transformations, it consistently produced results that matched the orbital parameters of Earth, our planet's distance from the Sun, its orbital period, the tilt of its axis. It was as if 3I Atlas was confirming its awareness of Earth specifically, distinguishing it from the other planets in our solar system. "They're telling us they know exactly where we are," noted Dr. Marcus Way. "This isn't a broadcast in all directions hoping someone might hear. This is targeted communication to Earth specifically. They know we're here, they know what kind of planet we inhabit, and they're trying to convey information directly relevant to us." But alongside the excitement of potential first contact, a darker undercurrent of concern was growing, because mixed with the scientific analysis and the thrill of discovery was a question that security agencies around the world were asking with increasing urgency. What does 3I Atlas want? The object was approaching the inner solar system, its trajectory bringing it closer to Earth with each passing day. Not dangerously close, The calculations showed it would pass well beyond lunar orbit, but close enough that the question of intent became impossible to ignore. Was this a peaceful mission of exploration and communication, a scientific probe sent by a curious civilization to study other worlds? Or was it something else, something with purposes we couldn't yet comprehend and might not welcome? Government agencies had been monitoring the situation quietly since the impact, but the transmission that morning had forced their involvement to become more active. Contingency plans were being dusted off and updated. Military radar networks typically focused on tracking satellites and missiles were being retasked to monitor 3I Atlas continuously. Questions about planetary defense capabilities were being asked in secure conference rooms around the world, even though everyone knew the answers were inadequate if 3I Atlas proved hostile. Dr. Amanda Foster, analyzing the latest thermal data, noticed something that added to the growing sense of urgency. The object's temperature was still rising, and the pattern of heat distribution across its surface had changed. What had looked like sequential activation of dormant systems now appeared to be building towards something. Energy accumulating, systems coming online, not just to sustain basic function, but to prepare for some kind of action. "It's ramping up," she reported to colleagues with undisguised worry. "Whatever it's preparing to do, it's getting ready to do it soon. The power levels I'm seeing now are orders of magnitude higher than they were even 12 hours ago. This isn't steady-state operation. This is preparation for something energy-intensive." The night between September 29th and 30th marked a turning point in how humanity viewed its place in the cosmos. While most of the world slept, unaware of the drama unfolding in observatories and research centers, a small community of scientists and officials wrestled with implications that would soon become unavoidable for everyone. In a nondescript building in Geneva, Dr. Philippe Moreau sat alone in his office, staring at data streams from multiple observatories. As coordinator for the International Astronomical Union's Near-Earth Object Program, he'd spent 20 years tracking rocks that might threaten our planet. He'd become comfortable with cosmic threats that followed predictable rules, objects whose dangers could be calculated with precision. 3I Atlas represented something entirely different. It wasn't just the uncertainty about its nature that troubled him. It was the certainty that, whatever it was, it existed far outside the framework of experience humanity had built over centuries of scientific observation. He drafted and deleted 3 different statements that night, each attempting to communicate the situation to officials who would need to brief world leaders. How do you explain that the rules might have changed, that the universe might be far more populated, far more dangerous, or far more wondrous than anyone had seriously considered? Meanwhile, in a cramped radio astronomy lab in New Mexico, graduate student Rebecca Torres was experiencing something that would define the rest of her life. She'd been assigned the overnight shift to monitor incoming data from 3I Atlas, expecting routine work that might contribute a footnote to her dissertation. Instead, she found herself at the center of what might be humanity's most significant moment. The signal processing software she'd been running suddenly flagged an anomaly in the transmission patterns. Not an error, a deliberate change. The carrier frequency had shifted slightly, and within that shift was embedded another layer of information she hadn't noticed before. It was like discovering a hidden message within a message, a level of sophistication that suggested whoever designed this communication system had anticipated multiple levels of analysis. She spent an hour verifying her findings, running the data through different algorithms, making absolutely certain she wasn't seeing artifacts or misinterpreting noise. Then she sent a message to her advisor with hands that trembled from something between excitement and existential dread. "I found something. I think they're using multi-layered encoding. The signal is more complex than we realized, much more complex." Her advisor, Dr. Thomas Chen, no relation to Sarah Chen, called her immediately, despite the 3 a.m. hour. "Walk me through exactly what you're seeing," he said, and she could hear him already pulling up the data on his own computer, sleep forgotten. What Rebecca had discovered would reshape the decoding effort over the next several days. The transmission wasn't just a single message, it was multiple messages nested within each other, each layer requiring different mathematical keys to unlock. It was as if the senders were simultaneously communicating at multiple levels of complexity, perhaps addressing different audiences, or perhaps ensuring redundancy in case some layers failed to be understood. Across the Pacific, in a secure facility outside Tokyo, Dr. Yuki Tanaka was having a very different conversation about 3I Atlas. She wasn't an astronomer or physicist. She was a game theorist and strategic analyst who had been pulled into emergency consultations as governments tried to understand not what 3I Atlas was saying, but what it might be planning. "We need to consider adversarial scenarios," she argued during a video conference with security officials from several nations. "I'm not saying this is hostile. I'm saying we need to prepare for that possibility alongside all the others. An intelligence capable of engineering something like this, of sending it across interstellar distances, of awakening it with such precision, that intelligence is operating on a level we can't fully comprehend, which means their goals, their ethics, their fundamental decision-making processes might be utterly alien to us." She pulled up a presentation she'd been developing throughout the sleepless night. Consider the energy investment required to send 3I Atlas on its journey, the resources, the time, the technological sophistication. No civilization makes that kind of investment casually. There's a purpose here, a goal, and we need to understand it before we decide how to respond. One of the officials pushed back. "But the signal, they're trying to communicate. Doesn't that suggest peaceful intent?" Dr. Tanaka's expression was grim. "Communication doesn't necessarily imply benevolence. It could be a reconnaissance report. It could be psychological preparation. It could be a test of our capabilities, or, yes, it could be genuine outreach. My point is that we need to plan for all possibilities, not just the ones we find comforting." The meeting continued for hours, cycling through scenarios that ranged from first contact protocols to evacuation plans, from communication strategies to worst-case military responses. It was surreal theater, serious people in serious rooms planning for situations that belonged in science fiction, yet treating them with the gravity of immediate threats. Back in Europe, Dr. Elena Vasquez had assembled a small team to focus on a question everyone else seemed to be overlooking. Where had 3I Atlas come from originally? If they could identify its origin star system, perhaps they could learn something about the civilization that sent it. working backward from its current trajectory and velocity, accounting for gravitational influences from stars it might have passed near during its journey. They began building models of possible paths through space. The challenge was immense. Over millions of years, tiny uncertainties in measurement compound into vast uncertainties in trajectory. After that much time, pinpointing an origin becomes nearly impossible. But one thing became clear through their analysis. 3I Atlas had traveled an enormous distance. The nearest candidate star systems that aligned with possible trajectories were hundreds of light years away. The object had been traveling for at least 1 million years, possibly several million, crossing distances so vast that the light from its home star was only now reaching Earth, carrying images of a world as it existed before humans evolved. "Think about that time scale," Elena said to her team, her voice filled with wonder and unease. "Whoever sent this made plans that would unfold over longer than our entire species has existed. They couldn't know what they'd find when 3I Atlas arrived. We might have still been apes when it was launched. We might not have existed at all." This realization led to another troubling thought. What if 3I Atlas wasn't looking for humans specifically? What if it was looking for any intelligence, any technological civilization that might have emerged on Earth during the vast span of its journey? We might be the civilization it found, but we weren't necessarily the civilization it expected. As the sun rose over different parts of the world on September 30th, the secret that researchers and officials had been trying to contain began to break into public awareness. Too many people had observed too much. Social media posts from amateur astronomers describing unusual signals. Science journalists who had sources in the research community and were putting pieces together. Anonymous leaks from people who felt the public had a right to know. By mid-morning, the first mainstream news outlet broke the story. Their headline was cautious but explosive. "Mysterious interstellar object transmitting signals toward Earth. Scientists confirm." Within an hour, it was the top story on every major news platform worldwide. The response was immediate and chaotic. Social media erupted with speculation, hope, fear, and every emotion in between. Religious leaders issued statements ranging from welcoming to apocalyptic. Conspiracy theories that had been circulating in fringe communities for decades suddenly didn't seem quite so fringe. Financial markets, always sensitive to uncertainty, began to swing wildly as traders tried to price in the implications of first contact. Government press offices found themselves overwhelmed with inquiries from journalists, citizens, and organizations demanding information, reassurance, or both. The careful statements prepared overnight suddenly seemed inadequate for the scale of public reaction. This wasn't a story that could be managed with technical language and cautious qualifications. This was humanity confronting a fundamental shift in its understanding of existence. Dr. Helena Kowalski, whose radio astronomy network had detected the first deliberate transmission, found herself thrust into an uncomfortable spotlight. News organizations wanted interviews, wanted her to explain in simple terms what the signals meant, what 3I Atlas was, whether humanity was in danger. She tried to be honest while avoiding both sensationalism and false reassurance. "We're receiving structured communications from an artificial object of interstellar origin," she stated during a hastily arranged press conference. What those communications mean, what the intentions of its creators might be, These are questions we're working to answer. What I can tell you is that we're witnessing something unprecedented in human history, and we're approaching it with the rigor and caution it deserves. When a reporter asked whether people should be afraid, she paused for a long moment before answering. Fear comes from uncertainty, and we have plenty of that right now, but we also have an opportunity to learn, to grow, to potentially make contact with intelligence beyond our world. I think we should approach this with open minds and careful preparation, not panic. Her words were measured and calm, but privately, she shared the anxiety that was rippling through the scientific community. Because while the world was just learning about 3I Atlas and its signals, researchers were already tracking new developments that hadn't yet been made public. The object's velocity had changed, not dramatically, but measurably. It was accelerating, adjusting its trajectory in ways that required thrust, propulsion, active control. Whatever systems had awakened inside 3I Atlas after the impact, they now included engines capable of altering its path through space, and the direction of that adjustment was troubling. The new trajectory wasn't taking it past Earth at a safe distance, as originally calculated. It was bringing it closer. The trajectory correction was subtle enough that it took several hours of precise measurements to confirm, but by early afternoon on September 30th, there was no doubt among the tracking teams. 3I Atlas had modified its course, and the new path would bring it significantly nearer to Earth than the original projections suggested. Dr. Marcus Way found himself in the uncomfortable position of being the first to brief government officials on this development. The video conference included representatives from space agencies and defense departments across multiple nations, all of them waiting for him to explain what the course change meant. The acceleration we're observing is consistent with a propulsion system activating, he began, displaying tracking data on shared screens. The thrust is precise and controlled. This isn't outgassing or some random effect. The object is steering itself. Based on current observations, the revised trajectory will bring it to within approximately 180,000 kilometers of Earth. Someone on the call immediately asked the obvious question, "Is that dangerous?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "That's still well beyond the orbit of our moon, which is about 384,000 kilometers away. So in terms of collision risk, no, this doesn't present an immediate threat to Earth. But it does suggest that Earth is a specific destination or point of interest. The object is coming closer to us deliberately." The implications hung heavy in the digital silence that followed. One thing to receive signals from something passing by at a distance, quite another to realize it was actively steering toward your planet. "Can we calculate when it will reach closest approach?" another voice asked. "Based on current acceleration patterns, approximately 8 to 10 days from now," Marcus replied. "Though that could change if it modifies thrust again. We're monitoring constantly." As that briefing concluded, another was beginning at a research facility in Australia. Dr. Priya Sharma, a specialist in artificial intelligence and machine learning, had been brought in to apply pattern recognition algorithms to the signals from 3I Atlas. Her background in analyzing complex communication systems, she'd spent years developing translation software for endangered human languages, made her uniquely qualified to look for structure in the alien transmissions. What her algorithms had discovered was both fascinating and disturbing. The signals weren't just carrying information, they were adapting in real time based on what Earth was transmitting. Radio emissions from our planet, the constant background chatter of our civilization's electromagnetic signature, were being received and analyzed by 3i Atlas, and the object was modifying its subsequent signals in response. It's learning our languages, Priya explained to her team, pulling up visualizations that showed the correlation between Earth's broadcasts and changes in 3i Atlas's transmission patterns. Not perfectly. I don't think it fully understands us yet, but it's definitely processing our radio and television signals, extracting patterns, attempting to match its communications to formats we use. One of her colleagues, a linguist named Dr. James Morrison, was both excited and unnerved by this revelation. That level of adaptive communication suggests extraordinary computational capability, and it raises questions about how long it's been listening. These transmissions only started after the impact 3 days ago, but what if it's been passively collecting our signals for much longer? What if it knows far more about us than we realize? The question resonated uncomfortably through the research community as word of Priya's finding spread. If 3i Atlas had been observing Earth's radio emissions during its approach, broadcasts that had been leaking into space for over a century, then it potentially had access to an enormous archive of human culture, conflict, and technological development. Our television shows and radio programs, our military communications and civilian broadcasts, all of it radiating outward into space where a sufficiently advanced receiver could capture and analyze it. We've essentially been broadcasting our entire modern history to anyone who cared to listen, observed Dr. Robert Martinez during a discussion of these implications. And now we know someone was listening. The question is what conclusions they've drawn from what they heard. That evening, as public awareness of 3i Atlas continued to spread and dominate global conversation, a smaller story emerged that would prove significant. An amateur radio operator in Brazil named Carlos Mendoza reported receiving what he described as an impossible signal, a transmission that appeared to be coming from 3i Atlas, but was being broadcast on frequencies and using protocols that seemed specifically designed to be received by consumer radio equipment. I was scanning channels, just routine monitoring, when I picked up something that didn't belong, Carlos explained in a video he posted online. It wasn't the scientific signals the observatories are receiving. This was something else, something that seemed like it was meant for regular people to hear. He recorded several minutes of the transmission before it ceased, and the audio he posted created an immediate sensation. Unlike the complex, data-dense signals being analyzed by research teams, this broadcast was simpler, more direct. When processed through standard audio software, it produced tones and patterns that had an almost musical quality, not random noise, but structured sequences that suggested intentionality. Within hours, thousands of people around the world were tuning their radios to the frequencies Carlos had reported, hoping to catch these signals for themselves. Some did, and their recordings flooded online forums and social media. The patterns varied slightly between broadcasts, but all shared similar characteristics, rhythmic, almost hypnotic sequences of tones that seemed to convey something, meaning, emotion, or purpose that remained tantalizingly just beyond comprehension. Dr. Sarah Chen, already exhausted from days of intense analysis, found herself drawn into investigating these amateur radio reports. Initially skeptical, thinking they might be hoaxes or misidentified terrestrial signals, she began to reconsider as the evidence accumulated. The transmissions were definitely originating from the direction of 3I Atlas. The timing correlated with the object's position in the sky. And, most intriguingly, the signal characteristics matched what you'd expect if someone was deliberately trying to broadcast using simple, accessible technology. It's like they're trying multiple communication channels simultaneously, she theorized. The complex signals to our scientific instruments, the adaptive patterns that respond to our broadcasts, and now these simpler transmissions aimed at the general population. They're covering all bases, trying to reach us through every possible avenue. But why? That question dominated discussions among researchers trying to understand the communication strategy. Why would an intelligence capable of crossing interstellar space, of building something as sophisticated as 3I Atlas, bother broadcasting signals that anyone with a ham radio could receive? Dr. Thomas Chen, Rebecca Torres's advisor, proposed an answer that was both logical and slightly unsettling. Maybe they want everyone to know. Maybe they're not just contacting governments and scientists. Maybe they're trying to reach all of humanity. A message that bypasses official channels and goes directly to individuals. That's either remarkably democratic, or it's a way to create pressure on authorities to respond in particular ways. As October 1st began in various time zones around the world, the situation had evolved beyond anything that could be contained or controlled through official channels. 3I Atlas was now a global phenomenon, dominating conversations from casual gatherings to emergency sessions of international bodies. Everyone had opinions, theories, hopes, or fears about what it represented. Religious communities struggled with implications. Some saw 3I Atlas as a test of faith, others as fulfillment of prophecy, still others as an opportunity for dialogue about creation and the diversity of God's works. Philosophers debated what the existence of alien intelligence meant for concepts of human uniqueness and purpose. Artists began creating works inspired by or responding to the first contact scenario unfolding in real time. And through it all, 3I Atlas continued its patient journey toward Earth, transmitting its multi-layered messages, adjusting its course with precise burns of thrust that spoke of vast technological capability and deliberate intent. In a secure facility beneath Washington, D.C., representatives from various government departments were engaged in urgent planning sessions. The questions they grappled with would have seemed absurd just days earlier, but now demanded immediate attention. Should there be an official response to 3I Atlas? If so, who speaks for humanity? What should be said? How do you negotiate, if negotiation is even possible, with an intelligence that might be millions of years more advanced? We need protocols, argued one State Department official, some framework for deciding how humanity responds collectively rather than as a chaos of individual nations. Protocols take time to develop and build consensus around, countered a military advisor. We have 8 days until closest approach, maybe less if it accelerates again. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide quickly. The tension between measured, careful response and the urgent need for action was playing out in similar rooms across the world. Meanwhile, scientific teams were racing against time to decode more of the transmissions, to understand what 3i Atlas was actually trying to communicate beyond its simple announcement of presence. Dr. Jennifer Morrison's computational analysis team had made progress on certain segments of the complex signals. Mathematical structures within the data appeared to describe orbital mechanics, not just Earth's orbit, but trajectories throughout the solar system, including paths between planets that suggested possible travel routes. It was as if 3i Atlas was providing a map, or perhaps instructions, though for what purpose remained unclear. There are sequences that might be temporal markers, Jennifer explained during a briefing with other researchers. Timestamps, countdowns, or references to specific points in time. If we're interpreting this correctly, some of these markers align with dates in the near future, days from now, which suggests whatever 3i Atlas came here to do, it's planning to do it soon. That revelation added new urgency to efforts already proceeding at breakneck pace. Not just first contact, but first contact on a timeline that was rapidly compressing. Whatever questions humanity needed to answer about how to respond, those answers would need to come quickly. The morning of October 2nd brought new developments that shifted the conversation in unexpected directions. A team of anthropologists and sociologists had been quietly consulting with space agencies, offering perspectives on how different cultures might interpret and respond to contact with 3i Atlas. Their report, when it leaked to the press, highlighted something that officials had been trying to avoid confronting directly. There was no unified humanity that could speak with one voice. Dr. ʻOumuamua, lead author of the sociological assessment, had spent the previous days reviewing responses from communities around the world. The diversity of reactions was stunning and in some cases deeply concerning. In some regions, 3i Atlas is being welcomed as a liberator, a force that might offer solutions to problems we've failed to solve ourselves, she noted in her report. In others, it's viewed as a threat to cultural identity, religious belief, or political sovereignty. Some communities are preparing celebrations, others are preparing for conflict, and most people are simply trying to process something that challenges every assumption they've held about humanity's place in existence. The report emphasized that any official response needed to account for this diversity, but it also acknowledged the near impossibility of that task. How do you represent billions of individuals with conflicting worldviews, hopes, and fears? The question had paralyzed international coordination efforts, with different nations proposing wildly different approaches to engaging with 3i Atlas. Meanwhile, at the Arecibo Replacement Facility in Puerto Rico, a massive radio telescope array that had been completed just 2 years earlier, Dr. Lisa Nakamura was leading an effort that bypassed all the diplomatic gridlock. Her team had prepared a response transmission, a carefully crafted message that attempted to communicate key information about Earth, humanity, and our desire for peaceful contact. We can't wait for perfect consensus, she argued, when questioned about the decision to transmit without full international approval. 3i Atlas is communicating with us. Silence in response could be interpreted in ways we can't predict. We need to show that we're listening, that we understand this is communication, that we're attempting to engage constructively. The transmission went out at 14:30 UTC, beamed directly toward 3i Atlas on multiple frequencies. It included mathematical proofs, basic information about Earth's biosphere, samples of human languages and music, and visual representations of human form and culture. It was humanity's first deliberate attempt to introduce itself to whatever intelligence controlled the mysterious object. The response came far faster than anyone expected. Within 3 hours, 3I Atlas altered its signal patterns dramatically. The transmissions became more focused, more intense, and, according to preliminary analysis, appeared to directly acknowledge elements of Earth's response. It was as if a conversation had been initiated, a back-and-forth exchange replacing the one-way broadcasts that had characterized the previous days. Dr. Priya Sharma's pattern recognition algorithms were working overtime to analyze these new interactive transmissions. What they revealed suggested that 3I Atlas possessed computational and analytical capabilities that far exceeded even optimistic estimates of what might be possible. "It's not just responding," Priya explained to her increasingly sleep-deprived team. "It's learning at an exponential rate. Each exchange seems to give a deeper understanding of our languages, our concepts, our ways of structuring information. At this pace, it might achieve near-fluent communication within days." That possibility excited linguists and communication specialists, while simultaneously unnerving security analysts who worried about an intelligence gaining such rapid understanding of human thought patterns and social structures. The question of whether this represented opportunity or vulnerability, or both, remained unresolved. On October 3rd, amateur astronomers began reporting visual changes to 3I Atlas itself. The object, previously appearing as a relatively dim point of light, even through powerful telescopes, had begun to brighten. Not gradually, but in distinct pulses that created a visible rhythm against the darkness of space. Videos of these pulsations spread rapidly online, watched by millions of people who found themselves mesmerized by the sight. There was something almost hypnotic about watching the object brighten and dim in regular patterns, a cosmic heartbeat that seemed to acknowledge its observers. Some found the display beautiful, even spiritual. Others found it deeply unsettling, a reminder that something vast and incomprehensible was approaching our world with purposes we couldn't yet fathom. Dr. Amanda Foster's thermal analysis team determined that the brightness variations correlated with massive energy transfers occurring within or across the object's surface. Whatever was causing the pulses required enormous power that was being generated or stored somewhere within 3I Atlas in quantities that challenged understanding. "The energy budget is staggering," Amanda reported during a briefing with space agency officials. "Each pulse releases more energy than a small nuclear reactor generates in a day, and it's doing this repeatedly with perfect regularity. Whatever power source this object possesses, it's far beyond anything we've achieved or even theorized." The implications for human technology were profound, but had to remain secondary to more immediate concerns. Because alongside the visual pulsations, 3I Atlas was exhibiting other behaviors that suggested its approach to Earth involved more than simple communication. Smaller objects, debris, or perhaps deliberately released components were being detected in the vicinity of 3I Atlas. Space tracking networks designed to monitor satellites and space junk were picking up dozens of new radar signatures, all originating from the main object. These fragments or deployments were spreading out in a pattern that some analysts interpreted as a scanning array, others as the beginning of a distributed network. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the game theorist who had been modeling possible scenarios, saw this development as potentially significant. If it's deploying subsystems or probes, that suggests it's preparing for detailed study of Earth and our solar system, she explained during a strategy session, which could be entirely benign, scientific exploration, data gathering, or it could be preparation for something else, reconnaissance, before more significant action. Her analysis included scenarios that kept military advisors awake at night. Distributed systems could be redundant fail-safes against any attempt to disable or destroy the main object. They could be sensors gathering detailed information about Earth's defenses and capabilities. Or they could be components of some larger system being assembled in space, a possibility that seemed like science fiction but could no longer be dismissed, given everything they'd witnessed. As October 4th arrived, marking 1 week since the impact that had awakened 3I Atlas, a curious shift occurred in public sentiment around the world. The initial shock and uncertainty were giving way to something more complex, a mixture of curiosity, excitement, anxiety, and a strange sense of historical weight. People were beginning to grasp that they were living through a moment that would define human history, that would divide time into before and after. Social media was filled with personal reflections on this realization. Parents wondered what world their children would grow up in, whether first contact would lead to a future of cooperation or conflict. Teachers grappled with how to discuss these events with students, trying to provide context and reassurance while acknowledging their own uncertainty. Artists, writers, and musicians were creating works at a furious pace, trying to capture or process the moment through their respective mediums. There was also a notable increase in philosophical discussions about human unity and identity. Faced with an intelligence from beyond Earth, many people found themselves reflecting on what united rather than divided humanity. Old conflicts seemed smaller, less significant, when measured against the cosmic scale represented by 3I Atlas. It was too early to say whether this sentiment would translate into lasting change, but for the moment there was a palpable sense of shared human experience. Not everyone shared this perspective, of course. Some communities doubled down on existing beliefs and boundaries, viewing 3 Atlas as validation of specific worldviews or as a threat that justified defensive isolation. The diversity of human response remained as vast as ever, but the conversation had fundamentally shifted. Everyone was, at minimum, talking about the same extraordinary event. In orbit around Earth, astronauts aboard the International Space Station had a unique perspective on unfolding events. Commander Isabella Rodriguez had been documenting her observations in personal logs that would later be shared with the public. From up here, you see Earth as a whole, no borders, no divisions, just one beautiful planet in the darkness, she recorded on October 4th. And now we can see 3I Atlas too, visible to the naked eye as it approaches. It's strange to look at our home and then at this visitor from beyond, knowing that in a few days they'll be in the same frame, separated by distance that's vast by human standards, but nothing in cosmic terms. I keep thinking about what this means, what changes, when we're no longer alone. I don't have answers, but I feel privileged to witness this from a place between worlds. Her reflections resonated deeply when they were shared, capturing something many people felt but struggled to articulate: the sense of standing at a threshold, of witnessing the end of one era of human history and the beginning of another. Back on Earth, researchers working to decode the transmissions from 3I Atlas had made a breakthrough that would prove both exciting and troubling. Dr. Rebecca Torres, the graduate student who had discovered the multi-layered encoding, had been focusing on one particular segment of the signals that repeated with unusual frequency. After days of analysis, she believed she'd cracked its meaning. "It's a location," she announced during a video conference with senior researchers. "Specific coordinates, not just in space but in time, a place on Earth and a specific date and time when something is supposed to happen." The implications sent a chill through everyone on the call. 3I Atlas wasn't just communicating in abstract terms, it was conveying specific information about a planned event on Earth's surface. The location Rebecca had decoded was in the Pacific Ocean, far from any landmass. The time was approximately 72 hours in the future. Could it be indicating where it plans to make closest approach? Someone asked, though the question felt hollow even as it was spoken. Dr. Marcus Way pulled up trajectory calculations. "No, the closest approach will happen nowhere near that location. If these coordinates are accurate and Rebecca's analysis looks solid, then 3I Atlas is telling us about something else, something that's going to happen at that specific place and time." The discovery of specific coordinates embedded in the transmissions created an immediate crisis among those monitoring the situation. What was planned for that location in the Pacific? Was 3I Atlas announcing its intentions, providing warning of some action it would take? Or was it requesting that humans gather at that location, perhaps to receive something or witness an event? Emergency meetings convened across multiple time zones as officials tried to determine appropriate responses. Naval vessels in the Pacific were quietly redirected to establish a perimeter around the coordinates, far enough away to avoid direct involvement in whatever might occur, close enough to observe and potentially respond. Satellite surveillance was intensified on that patch of ocean. Contingency plans were drafted and redrafted as analysts tried to prepare for scenarios that ranged from benign revelation to catastrophic threat. Dr. Elena Vasquez proposed a theory that gained traction among researchers seeking to make sense of the coordinates. What if it's not about the location at all? What if the point is demonstrating precision, showing us they can identify specific places on our planet, specific moments in time? It could be establishing credibility, proving they have detailed knowledge of Earth before making more significant communications. The theory was compelling, but ultimately unfalsifiable until the specified time arrived. All anyone could do was watch, wait, and prepare as best they could for unknown possibilities. Meanwhile, the ongoing dialogue, if it could be called that, between Earth and 3I Atlas was producing fascinating results. The object's transmissions were evolving rapidly, incorporating elements of human language and communication structures. Messages that had initially required teams of specialists days to partially decode were now becoming parsable in hours, sometimes faster. Dr. Thomas Chen, coordinating much of the linguistic analysis, described the progress with a mixture of wonder and unease. "It's like watching a child learn language, except compressed into an impossibly short time frame. Each exchange builds on the last. Concepts that were opaque yesterday are being expressed clearly today. At this rate, we might achieve genuinely fluent communication within the next 48 hours. That prospect thrilled those who saw 3i Atlas primarily as an opportunity for unprecedented learning and exchange. But it troubled others who worried about an intelligence gaining such rapid understanding of human thought, culture, and, potentially, vulnerabilities. The dual nature of first contact, simultaneously hopeful and precarious, was becoming increasingly apparent. On the evening of October 5th, something extraordinary occurred that briefly united humanity in shared wonder. 3i Atlas began transmitting images, not the abstract data visualizations that researchers had been extracting from earlier signals, but actual pictures, visual representations that could be displayed on ordinary screens and understood by anyone who looked at them. The first images were simple: geometric patterns, basic shapes, representations of astronomical objects like stars and planets. But they quickly became more complex. Images of what appeared to be technology, structures, and devices of unclear purpose but obvious sophistication. Images that might be representations of the civilization that built 3i Atlas, though their interpretation was ambiguous enough to spark fierce debate. And, most arrestingly, images of Earth itself, not photographs taken by 3i Atlas during its approach, but reconstructed images based on data gathered from radio emissions, visual observations, and analysis of our electromagnetic signature. The images of Earth were both beautiful and unsettling. They showed our planet as 3 Atlas understood it. Cities rendered in strange proportions that emphasized radio and electrical activity. Oceans depicted with attention to shipping routes and undersea cables, atmospheric patterns highlighted to show pollution and weather systems. It was Earth seen through alien perception, familiar yet profoundly different. "They're showing us how they see us," observed Dr. Priya Sharma while analyzing the images. "Not just physically, but conceptually. Look at how they've emphasized our communication networks, our energy infrastructure, our patterns of movement and activity. They're demonstrating understanding of human civilization at a systems level." The images sparked global conversation about how we appear to outside observation. Many people found the perspective humbling, seeing Earth's beauty but also its scars, its inequalities made visible in patterns of light and darkness, wealth and poverty rendered in electromagnetic signatures. It was a mirror held up by alien intelligence, reflecting humanity back to itself in ways that prompted uncomfortable reflection. Among the transmitted images was one that particularly captivated researchers and public alike. It appeared to show a trajectory, a line of travel through space, beginning at a distant point and ending at Earth. Along this line were markers that might represent time elapsed, distance traveled, or significant waypoints in the journey. At the beginning of the line was an image that could be interpreted as a star system, though identifying which specific system remained elusive despite intense astronomical analysis. "This might be 3i Atlas telling us its story," suggested Dr. Marcus Way. "Where it came from, how long it's been traveling, what its journey looked like across millions of years and unimaginable distances. If we can decode this fully, we might understand not just where it originated, but perhaps why it was sent, what purpose drives it." Teams of astronomers began comparing the origin imagery against catalogs of known star systems, looking for matches in stellar configuration, spectral characteristics, or any identifiable features. The work was painstaking and complicated by the fact that they were trying to match images filtered through alien representation against human observations of distant stars. Still, the effort continued, driven by hope that understanding 3I Atlas's origin might illuminate its purpose. As October 6th began, just over 24 hours before the time specified in the transmitted coordinates, global tension had reached an unprecedented level. News networks provided continuous coverage, alternating between scientific analysis, political commentary, and person-on-the-street interviews that captured the spectrum of human response. The Pacific location had become humanity's focal point, the place where whatever 3I Atlas had been building toward would presumably manifest. Ships from multiple nations now formed a loose perimeter around the coordinates, maintaining careful distances from each other and from the specified location. Military aircraft patrolled the skies above, while satellites overhead provided constant surveillance. It was the most intensely observed piece of empty ocean in human history. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had barely slept since the initial impact over a week earlier, found herself assigned to one of the observation vessels, a research ship hastily converted into a floating monitoring station. She stood on deck as the sun set on October 6th, watching the horizon and thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. A week ago, I was worried about getting enough telescope time to study an interesting interstellar object, she reflected in a voice message to her family. Now I'm standing on a ship in the middle of the Pacific, waiting to witness something that might redefine everything we know about intelligence in the universe. I'm scared, I'm excited, I'm exhausted. Mostly, I'm grateful to be here, to be part of this moment, whatever it brings. Her sentiment was echoed by researchers, officials, and ordinary people around the world who found themselves caught between anticipation and anxiety as the hours counted down. Social media was alive with speculation, theories ranging from plausible to absurd about what would occur at the specified time. Some predicted physical arrival of a smaller craft from 3I Atlas. Others expected a transmission of crucial information, perhaps the key to understanding everything that had transpired. Still others feared something catastrophic, though most acknowledged that if 3I Atlas intended harm, it had already had numerous opportunities to act. Religious vigils were being held in cities across the globe, people gathering to pray, meditate, or simply be together as the moment approached. In Tokyo, thousands assembled in parks to watch the night sky. In São Paulo, impromptu street parties mixed celebration with uncertainty. In Mumbai, families gathered on rooftops, sharing meals and speculation. The diversity of response remained, but there was unity in attention. Everyone watching, everyone waiting. At the International Space Station, Commander Rodriguez had positioned herself at a viewing port that offered the best angle on both Earth and 3I Atlas. The object was clearly visible now, brighter than any star, its regular pulsations creating a rhythm against the darkness. She recorded what she saw for posterity, knowing that her unique vantage point gave her a perspective no one on Earth could share. "From here you can see the whole picture," she narrated quietly. "Our beautiful planet, so vibrant and alive. And this visitor from the stars, approaching with such deliberate purpose. In a few hours, we'll know what that purpose is. Until then, I'm just watching, bearing witness to one of the most significant moments in human history from this incredible perch between worlds. Back on Earth, in the research vessel's command center, where Dr. Chen and dozens of other scientists were monitoring multiple data streams, someone noticed something that created immediate excitement. 3I Atlas's transmissions had changed again, not just in content, but in intensity and directional focus. The signals were now beaming strongly and specifically toward the Pacific coordinates, as if preparing that location for whatever was to come. "It's like watching a stage being lit before a performance," observed Dr. Jennifer Morrison, who had been brought aboard to provide computational analysis support. "The energy being directed at that location is substantial, not dangerous levels, but significant. It's doing something to prepare that spot, though for what remains unclear." Instruments aboard the monitoring vessels and overhead satellites were recording everything: electromagnetic signatures, thermal readings, gravitational measurements, visual observations across multiple spectrums. Whatever happened in the next day, it would be the most thoroughly documented event in human history. As midnight UTC approached, marking the transition to October 7th, the day specified in 3I Atlas's coordinates, Dr. Marcus Way issued an update to the global research network that had coalesced around studying the object. His message was brief, but captured the moment perfectly. "In approximately 18 hours, we'll have answers to at least some of our questions. Until then, verify your instruments, check your protocols, and prepare for the unexpected. We're about to witness something that will define our species' place in the cosmos. Let's make sure we document it properly, whatever it turns out to be." The message ended with a simple addendum that resonated with everyone who read it. "History is watching. Let's be worthy of this moment." The dawn of October 7th broke across the Pacific with unusual clarity. The weather in the region of the coordinates was remarkably calm, a fact that meteorologists found statistically improbable given typical patterns for that time of year, though whether this represented natural variation or something influenced by 3I Atlas remained a matter of speculation. Aboard the research vessels, crews had worked through the night, ensuring all monitoring equipment was functioning optimally. Dr. Sarah Chen had managed perhaps 2 hours of sleep, waking well before dawn to review data streams and prepare for whatever the day might bring. The tension aboard ship was palpable, but professional. Everyone focused on their specific responsibilities while maintaining awareness of the larger significance of the moment. 6 hours until the specified time, announced the ship's captain over the intercom at 12 Sandru UTC. The reminder was unnecessary. Everyone knew exactly how much time remained, but it served to mark the progression towards the unknown. Around the world, people were arranging their schedules to witness, or at least follow, the event. In regions where the specified time fell during working hours, productivity plummeted as people monitored news feeds and live streams. Where it occurred during night hours, people stayed awake or set alarms, unwilling to miss whatever revelation or development might unfold. It was perhaps the most globally synchronized moment of human attention in history. The transmissions from 3I Atlas had intensified further as morning progressed. What had been regular pulses of energy directed toward the coordinates had evolved into a continuous beam of focused electromagnetic radiation. The power levels involved were staggering. orders of magnitude beyond anything human technology could generate or sustain. Yet the effect remained non-threatening, at least according to every measurement being taken. The ocean surface at the target location showed no unusual heating, no disturbance beyond what might be expected from the prevailing winds and currents. Dr. Amanda Foster, monitoring the thermal data from her station, found the energy distribution puzzling. It's like the radiation is passing through the water without significant interaction, she reported during a briefing 4 hours before the specified time, which shouldn't be possible with these frequencies and power levels. Either there's something about the beam characteristics we're not understanding, or it's targeted at something beneath the surface that we can't detect. That possibility, that 3i Atlas might be interacting with something already present at the coordinates, opened disturbing new lines of speculation. Had something been placed there earlier, before humanity even knew 3i Atlas existed? Was this location significant because of natural features, or because it had been prepared as a meeting point long ago? Geological surveys of the ocean floor in that region showed nothing unusual. Typical Pacific Basin topology, no anomalous formations or structures. But the surveys weren't comprehensive, and the ocean depths held countless secrets that human exploration had barely begun to uncover. The possibility of missing something significant couldn't be dismissed. As 14 UTC approached, 4 hours remaining, Dr. Helena Kowalski's radio astronomy network detected a new development. 3i Atlas had begun broadcasting on emergency frequencies, channels reserved internationally for distress signals and critical communications. The transmission was simple, repeated continuously, a set of coordinates, the same Pacific location, a timestamp, the impending hour, and what appeared to be an invitation or instruction to observe. "They're making absolutely certain we're paying attention," Helena noted during a hurried consultation with other researchers. "Using frequencies that any receiver would pick up, making the message as clear and undeniable as possible. Whatever's about to happen, they want witnesses." The final hours before the specified time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. For those actively monitoring data streams, time flew by in a rush of instrument checks and data verification. For those watching and waiting, minutes felt like hours as anticipation built toward an unknown climax. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the game theorist who had been modeling scenarios since the beginning, found herself revising her probability assessments in real time as new data arrived. The deliberate nature of 3i Atlas's preparations, the emphasis on observation and documentation, the use of emergency frequencies, all of it suggested something significant but not immediately threatening. Her models increasingly favored scenarios involving demonstration or revelation rather than hostile action. "If you wanted to harm us, why give such advance notice?" she reasoned during a video conference with security officials. "Why provide specific coordinates and timing, ensuring maximum observation and preparation?" This pattern is consistent with wanting to communicate something important, not with aggressive intent, though I caution that our models are built on human psychology and game theory. We're potentially dealing with minds that follow different logical frameworks. Her caution was well taken, but in the absence of better alternatives, human frameworks for understanding remained the only tools available. And by those frameworks, 3i Atlas's behavior suggested an intelligence that valued communication, that wanted to be understood, that was methodically building toward some kind of revelation or demonstration. At 16 hours UTC, 2 hours remaining, the International Space Station reported a visual change to 3I Atlas itself. The regular pulsations that had characterized it for days had ceased, replaced by a steady, intense glow. The object appeared to have activated some new system or shifted its energy distribution in preparation for what was to come. Commander Isabella Rodriguez captured video of the change, her commentary marked by barely restrained excitement. "It's like watching something come fully online," she described. "The pulsing was interesting, almost alive. But this steady glow, it's purposeful, powerful, unmistakable. Something is about to happen. I can see it preparing from here, and it's one of the most beautiful and terrifying things I've ever witnessed." Her video, transmitted to Earth and immediately shared across news networks, gave billions of people their clearest view yet of 3I Atlas. The enhancement in brightness made individual features visible, structures or patterns on its surface that suggested complexity and design. It no longer looked like a simple asteroid or comet if it ever truly had. It looked constructed, artificial, purposeful. Social media exploded with reactions to the enhanced visibility. Artists created real-time sketches and renderings based on the video. Analysts attempted to identify specific features and their potential functions. Speculation ran wild about what those visible structures might represent: engines, sensors, communication arrays, or technologies whose purposes remained beyond human comprehension. As 17 UTC arrived, 1 hour remaining, a profound silence settled over the research vessel where Dr. Chen waited with her colleagues. The constant chatter of speculation and analysis had gradually faded, replaced by focused attention on instruments and displays. Everyone was watching, measuring, recording. The moment they'd been building toward was nearly upon them. Dr. Marcus Way, coordinating observation efforts across multiple vessels and satellite platforms, issued a final systems check. "All stations confirm readiness," came the responses in sequence. Dozens of observation platforms, hundreds of instruments, thousands of researchers, all focused on one patch of Pacific Ocean, all waiting for 18 UTC and whatever that moment would bring. The final 30 minutes felt suspended in time. Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the deck of the research vessel, alternating between watching the instruments inside and gazing at the empty ocean surface at the coordinates. The water was calm, reflecting afternoon sunlight, with peaceful indifference to the momentous occasion unfolding around it. Other researchers had joined her on deck, unable to remain inside at the crucial moment, despite the superior data access available in the command center. There was something fundamentally human about wanting to witness with their own eyes, not just through instruments and screens. If something extraordinary was about to occur, they wanted unmediated experience of it. At 17:45 UTC, 15 minutes remaining, Dr. Priya Sharma's analysis systems detected a shift in the transmission patterns from 3I Atlas. The continuous beam directed at the coordinates was being modulated in increasingly complex ways, as if fine-tuning or calibrating for some final action. The energy levels remained high but stable, no longer increasing but maintaining a precise output that suggested careful control. "Whatever it's preparing to do, it's ready," Priya reported over the communication network, linking all observation stations. "The signal characteristics have stabilized. We're in the final approach phase." Around the world, People settled into their chosen positions for witnessing the event. Families gathered around televisions and computer screens. Public viewing events filled city squares and parks. Offices and schools had effectively ceased normal operation, with everyone's attention turned to news coverage and live streams. Even those who had been skeptical or dismissive of the Three-Eye Atlas situation found themselves watching, unwilling to miss what might be a defining moment in human history. Religious leaders offered final prayers and reflections before the specified time. Scientists made last-minute adjustments to instruments. Officials reviewed response protocols one more time. Artists, writers, and documentarians positioned themselves to capture the moment from their unique perspectives. Humanity, in all its diversity, was united in attention, if not in interpretation. At 17:55 UTC, 5 minutes remaining, Commander Rodriguez from the International Space Station provided what would be remembered as one of the most poignant observations of the day. From up here, I can see the ships gathered around the coordinates. I can see Three-Eye Atlas glowing in the darkness of space. And I can see our beautiful planet turning beneath me, she narrated in a live broadcast. In 5 minutes, we'll know what this has all been leading to. But regardless of what happens, I want to say this. I'm proud to be human right now. Proud of how we've come together to face the unknown with courage and curiosity. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Her words resonated with millions listening, capturing something essential about the moment. The unity in facing cosmic uncertainty, the courage required to remain open to possibilities that challenged all assumptions. The final minute approached. Dr. Chen checked her watch obsessively, though displays all around her showed the countdown with far greater precision. 17:59 UTC, 30 seconds, 20, 10. At precisely 18 UTC, something began to happen at the Pacific coordinates. Not suddenly, not catastrophically, but with a calm inevitability that somehow made it even more profound. The ocean surface at the specified location began to glow. The glow started subtly, a faint luminescence beneath the water surface, barely visible in the afternoon sunlight. But within seconds, it intensified, growing brighter and more defined. It wasn't the harsh light of an explosion or fire, but rather a soft, pulsing radiance that seemed to come from deep below, rising upward through hundreds of meters of ocean. Every camera trained on the location captured the phenomenon from different angles. The water itself appeared to be transmitting light, as if it had become translucent, or as if the light was somehow bypassing normal opacity. The effect was beautiful, an ethereal blue-green glow that expanded outward from a central point, creating concentric circles of illumination that rippled across the surface. Radiation levels unchanged, reported one of the monitoring teams. No thermal increase detected. Whatever's causing this, it's not conventional energy emission. Dr. Sarah Chen watched transfixed as the glow continued to intensify. Her scientific training urged her to get back to the instruments, to analyze data streams, but she found herself rooted to the spot, witnessing with her own eyes something that defied immediate explanation. The light was growing stronger, and now it was beginning to rise above the water's surface, not as a beam shooting upward, but as a column of luminescence that seemed to lift itself gently from the ocean. The column grew taller, reaching perhaps 50 meters into the air before stabilizing. It rotated slowly, and as it turned, patterns became visible within the light, shapes and structures that suggested complexity, information, perhaps even images. It was as if 3i Atlas was painting something in the air using light as its medium, creating a three-dimensional display visible for kilometers in every direction. Aboard the research vessels, monitors showed that 3i Atlas itself had changed its behavior in concert with the appearance of the light column. The steady glow that had characterized it for the past hours had shifted to a pulsing rhythm that matched exactly the pulsations visible in the Pacific phenomenon. The object in space and the manifestation in the ocean were clearly synchronized, two parts of a single coordinated event. Dr. Jennifer Morrison's computational systems were working frantically to analyze the patterns appearing in the light column. "There's structure here," she announced, her voice tight with excitement. "The light variations aren't random. They're encoding information, three-dimensional data visualization. It's showing us something." As researchers watched and analyzed, the shapes within the column began to resolve into something more recognizable. They appeared to be representations of celestial bodies, planets, moons, orbital paths traced in luminous lines. It was a map, a diagram of a solar system rendered in light above the Pacific Ocean. But it wasn't our solar system. The orbital configurations were different, the number of planets not matching what orbited our sun. This was another star system entirely, being displayed with casual mastery of technology that could project coherent images across such vast scales. "Is this where 3i Atlas came from?" someone asked over the communication network, voicing what many were thinking. The answer came moments later as the display shifted, animated. One of the planets in the alien solar system was highlighted, and from it emerged a point of light that began traveling outward, away from its parent star. The journey was depicted in compressed time, the point of light moving through space, passing other stars shown as bright nodes in the darkness, traveling for what the display suggested was an immense duration. The trajectory shown in the light column matched the path researchers had theorized for 3i Atlas, a journey of millions of years across hundreds of light years of space. The display was confirming their theories while simultaneously providing information that would have taken human science decades or centuries to determine with certainty. As the animated journey continued, Dr. Elena Vasquez realized what they were witnessing. "It's telling us its story," she said with awe. "The complete narrative of 3i Atlas, where it came from, how long it traveled, what it encountered along the way. This is first contact rendered as historical narrative. The display showed the point of light, 3i Atlas, passing near several star systems during its long voyage. At some, it appeared to pause or alter course slightly, perhaps gathering data or making observations. At others, it continued without deviation. The journey was depicted with such clarity that astronomers were already identifying which specific stars might correspond to the waypoints shown. Then the display reached the climax of the journey, arrival at our solar system. The representation of our sun appeared in the light column, and around it, the familiar configuration of our planets. 3i Atlas's trajectory brought it into this system, approaching from interstellar space, beginning the observations that had ultimately led to this moment. But the display didn't end with arrival. It continued forward, showing not what had happened, but what was planned. The trajectory extended beyond the present moment, showing 3i Atlas's intended path through the inner solar system. It would pass Earth, shown as a special highlight among the planets, at a distance that matched the calculations researchers had made. Then it would continue onward, eventually exiting the solar system on the other side, resuming its journey into the cosmic depths beyond. "It's not staying," Dr. Marcus Way said quietly, processing the implications. "This isn't colonization or invasion or even extended study. It's passing through just as we originally calculated. But it's taking the time to communicate, to share information, to make contact before continuing its voyage." The realization brought both relief and a strange sense of melancholy. The extraordinary visitor that had captured humanity's attention so completely, that had forced us to confront our place in the cosmos, was merely stopping by. We were one point along a journey that spanned millions of years and would continue for millions more, significant enough for contact, but not the final destination. As this understanding settled over the observers, the display in the light column shifted again. The solar system representation faded, replaced by something new, images that appeared to show the civilization that had built 3I Atlas. The forms were abstract enough that definitive interpretation was difficult, but they suggested beings unlike humans, perhaps not even corporeal in ways we would recognize. They showed structures that might be cities or vessels, technologies that served purposes beyond immediate comprehension. Dr. Priya Sharma's pattern recognition systems were capturing every detail, but she found herself watching with naked eyes, unwilling to experience this moment solely through technological mediation. "They're introducing themselves," she whispered, "showing us who they are or who they were when they built this. First contact not with beings themselves, but with their emissary, their message sent across time and distance." The images of the alien civilization cycled through various representations, their world, their achievements, perhaps their history or culture. Each image lingered just long enough for comprehension before transitioning to the next. It was an information transfer designed for maximum efficiency, conveying vast amounts of data in condensed visual form. Then came what many would later describe as the most profound moment of the entire display. The images shifted to show Earth, not as 3I Atlas saw it through sensors and telescopes, but Earth as it had been at various points in its history. The planet during the age of dinosaurs, lifeless continents before the evolution of complex organisms, the ice ages, the rise of human civilization. They had been watching us for far longer than the few weeks since detection. Or more accurately, 3I Atlas had been observing Earth throughout its approach, which might have taken decades or even longer as it decelerated from interstellar velocities. It had witnessed our planet's evolution in recent geological time, had seen humanity emerge from among countless other species, had watched our rapid technological development. The display showed human achievements, cities growing, lights spreading across the night side of the planet, satellites being launched, telescopes being built to study the cosmos. It was Earth's story told from an outside perspective, highlighting moments of development and discovery. There was no judgment in the presentation, no indication of approval or disapproval. Just observation, documentation, acknowledgement. The final image was current Earth, the planet as it existed at this very moment, with all its beauty and complexity, its problems and potentials. The image lingered, as if 3I Atlas was giving humanity time to see itself as it was seen from beyond, to absorb the perspective of cosmic observer. Then, Gradually, the light column began to fade. The glow diminished, the patterns dissolved, and within minutes the ocean surface had returned to its normal appearance, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred, though every instrument and witness confirmed otherwise. In the silence that followed, Dr. Sarah Chen found her voice. Did we just receive the most comprehensive first contact message in history, delivered as a light show in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? Dr. Marcus Way, monitoring transmissions from 3i Atlas, provided confirmation. The object is reducing power output. The beam to this location has ceased. Based on its current energy signature, it appears to be returning to a lower operational state. I think the demonstration is complete. That was what it came here to do. Around the world, people who had witnessed the display, either directly through the numerous cameras positioned around the coordinates or via the live broadcasts that carried it globally, sat in stunned silence or erupted in emotion. What they had seen defied simple categorization. It was art, science, history, and prophecy combined. It was first contact achieved not through language or mathematics alone, but through visual narrative that transcended cultural and linguistic barriers. The implications would take years, perhaps decades, to fully process. 3i Atlas had confirmed we were not alone in the universe. It had demonstrated technology far beyond human capabilities. It had shared knowledge of its origin and journey. It had observed Earth with patience and apparent interest. And it had chosen to communicate not with threat or demand, but with information, beauty, and what might even be interpreted as respect. In the days that followed, as 3i Atlas continued its trajectory past Earth and toward the outer solar system, researchers would analyze every frame of the display, every pattern in the light, extracting layers of information that the initial viewing had only begun to reveal. The images of the alien civilization would be studied in minute detail. The journey path would be mapped against known star catalogs. The observations of Earth would be compared with our own historical records. But in that immediate moment, as the light faded from the Pacific and the sun began its descent toward the horizon, there was simply wonder. Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the deck of the research vessel, tears streaming down her face, not from fear or sadness, but from the overwhelming emotional impact of witnessing something that changed everything. "We're not alone," she said to anyone within earshot, though of course they already knew. "We've never been alone. The universe is populated by minds and civilizations separated by such vast distances that contact is rare, precious, and brief. But it happens. It happened here, today, to us." Commander Isabella Rodriguez, watching from the International Space Station as 3i Atlas began to grow slightly dimmer, resuming its long journey through the cosmos, added her own reflection to the historical record. "Today, humanity grew up a little," she narrated. "We learned that we're part of something larger, a community of intelligence scattered across the galaxy, each pursuing our own paths through space and time. 3i Atlas came to us as teacher, observer, and fellow traveler. It asked nothing of us except attention. In return, it gave us perspective on our world, our place in the cosmos, and the knowledge that other minds are out there, looking at the same stars we see, asking the same questions we ask, reaching across the darkness to make connection where and when possible." As night fell across various parts of Earth and people looked up at the stars, 3I Atlas was visible, a bright point of light moving against the fixed constellations, already growing more distant. It would remain visible for several more weeks as it departed the inner solar system, a cosmic reminder of what had occurred and what had been learned. The object that had begun as an astronomical curiosity, that had evolved into a source of wonder and concern, had ultimately become something far more profound, a bridge across the cosmic gulf, a messenger from the vast community of intelligence that humanity had only begun to understand existed. And though 3I Atlas itself would soon be gone, continuing its journey to destinations unknown, it had left humanity forever changed. We had been seen, acknowledged, and invited to see ourselves as part of a larger story, one that spanned not just our own history or even our planet's lifetime, but the entire vast narrative of intelligence emerging across the cosmos, reaching out across impossible distances, making connections that mattered precisely because they were so rare and so hard-won. The universe, we now knew with certainty, was not empty. It was filled with voices, some nearby in cosmic terms, others impossibly distant. And in between those voices, objects like 3I Atlas traveled, patient emissaries carrying greetings, knowledge, and the simple but profound message: you are not alone.